Please don't come tonight. It would be awkward. Those words sat on the screen like a verdict. Her hand trembled around the phone. Her dress was laid out, the blue silk she bought months ago, still crisp, the perfume she saved for big moments resting on the dresser like it was waiting for a reason to matter. Makeup half done, eyelashes untouched, heart pounding. I'd spent my whole life trying not to embarrass them. Tonight, they were ashamed of me again. She could almost feel the room she'd imagined, a hall full of applause, friends turned faces, a moment she'd dreamed of since she was small. But that text changed everything. Before we go any further, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What they didn't know was that my name was already printed on every program in the room. 10 minutes earlier she had smiled, genuinely, as she stepped into the elevator, thinking tonight might be different. Her inner voice, the one that kept asking, "Am I enough?" had faded for a second. But now that voice was screaming. You feel it too sometimes, right? That ache when something you've prepared for your whole life slips out of reach for reasons you don't fully understand. They said no. Her dream said yes. And in that moment she realized how deeply rejection could cut, deeper than any failure she'd known before. But this wasn't the end of her story. Not by a long shot. If this is the tone and emotional build you want, tell me and I'll continue the next segments tightly woven with character development, tension, questions for the audience, and the emotional journey that follows this cold open. She wasn't the loud one. That title belonged to her brother, Jason, whose science fair ribbons were framed in the hallway like museum pieces, whose soccer trophies had their own shelf, whose smallest wins were announced to relatives before dinner was even served. Her victories were quieter, softer, easier to miss. A perfect report card earned a nod while dishes clinked in the sink. A writing contest certificate stayed folded in her backpack for days before anyone noticed. She learned early that pride in that house had a volume setting, and hers was always turned low. Maybe you know that feeling, when you stop sharing good news because the room never seems to have space for it. When celebration feels like you're asking for too much. She didn't resent her brother, she resented how invisible effort could be when it didn't come with applause. And slowly, invisibility became her role, the one everyone seemed comfortable letting her keep. Her parents believed in presentation. The lawn trimmed, the car washed on Saturdays, holiday photos coordinated down to the colors of their sweaters. Reputation came first. What would people say? That question guided everything from church attendance to career choices. Effort mattered, but only if it could be displayed. Quiet persistence didn't photograph well. Emotional struggles didn't make good dinner conversation. When she once tried to explain how overwhelmed she felt during her final exams, her mother smoothed her hair and said, "You're strong. You'll handle it," before turning back to a phone call about a neighbor's promotion. Support in that house sounded like reassurance without listening. Care looked like advice without curiosity. They didn't dislike me. They just didn't know what to do with a daughter they couldn't show off. That realization didn't come all at once. It settled in slowly, like dust you only notice when sunlight hits it just right. By 16, she had mastered the art of being low maintenance. She filled out college applications alone at the kitchen table while a television game show played in the background. She learned how to sign permission slips herself, how to Google answers adults were too busy to explain. Praise, when it came, was practical. Good, that'll look nice on applications. Smart choice, that's stable. Love was there, in its own structured way, but it was tied to outcomes, to proof, to things that could be pointed at. Do you grow differently when affection feels conditional, even if no one ever says it out loud? Do you start measuring your worth in achievements because it's the only scale anyone hands you? She did. Every grade, every internship, every late night studying became another quiet attempt to earn a spotlight that never seemed to swing her way. Money was never discussed directly, only implied through tension. "We can't waste," her father would say, folding receipts with tight fingers. So when she left for college 2 states away, she told them scholarships covered everything. They didn't ask for details. They didn't ask how I paid my rent. They didn't ask about the extra shifts at the campus cafe, the nights she walked home at midnight with the smell of burnt coffee in her hair and calculus formulas still spinning in her head. She told herself it was easier this way, that independence was a kind of freedom. Still, there were moments, counting coins for laundry, choosing between textbooks and groceries, when she wished someone would call just to ask, "Are you managing okay?" Have you ever struggled quietly because explaining felt heavier than enduring? Because being the strong one became a cage you helped build. The Gala had a name people said with a certain tone, the kind reserved for places you only see in magazines left on glass coffee tables. It was invitation only, black ties and long gowns, a charity event on paper but, in truth, a gathering point for influence. Donors, executives, board members, the kind of people whose casual conversations shaped opportunities for years to come. Photos from previous years showed chandeliers like constellations and tables arranged with mathematical precision. In our house, that invitation might as well have been a royal decree. My mother held the embossed card like it was fragile, reading the names of the hosts twice, then a third time, committing them to memory. My father Googled the venue, nodding at the architecture, already picturing himself inside. To them, this wasn't just dinner. It was elevation, proximity, a chance to stand near people they'd spent decades admiring from a distance. In the weeks leading up to it, the energy at home shifted. My mother practiced smiles in the hallway mirror, testing which one looked warm but not overeager. She laid out jewelry on her dresser like strategic options, each piece paired with a different version of who she wanted to be that night. My father rehearsed introductions under his breath while scrolling through LinkedIn profiles, repeating names until they sounded natural. "You never know who you'll be standing next to," he said, straightening his tie in the reflection of the microwave door. Conversations at dinner revolved around seating charts they hadn't seen and people they hoped to meet. I listened, nodding, invisible as usual, while mentally calculating deadlines and invoices and the quiet reality of my own life running on parallel tracks they rarely asked about. When I finally mentioned that I'd be in the city that same evening, my mother paused just a second too long. "Oh," she said, careful, measured. "You wouldn't enjoy it." My father added, "It's not really your scene." The words were gentle, almost kind, wrapped in concern, which somehow made them land harder. Not an argument, not a rejection loud enough to protest, just a soft closing of a door I hadn't even said I wanted to walk through. Have you ever been excluded in a way that sounded thoughtful? Like someone deciding your limits for you, smiling while they did it? I told them I understood. I always understood. That was my role. But as they returned to discussing valet parking and donation tiers, a quiet thought settled in my chest, steady and certain. They thought I didn't belong in rooms like that. I'd been building them. After college, my life developed a rhythm no one at home ever really noticed. My lights stayed on long after midnight, the glow of my laptop reflecting in the window while the rest of the building slept. Emails came in marked urgent, flagged, time-stamped from cities in different time zones, and I answered them quietly, thumbs moving fast, phone always on silent when I visited my parents so no one would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. My calendar filled with meetings I described vaguely as work stuff, easier than explaining, projects still taking shape, partnerships still fragile, ideas that felt too important to expose to casual dismissal. Have you ever kept something close to your chest, not out of secrecy, but self-protection? When support feels uncertain, silence starts to feel safer than hope. There were train rides at dawn I never mentioned, early flights booked with reward points and careful budgeting, conference rooms with glass walls where people twice my age asked for my opinion and actually waited to hear it. I learned to speak without shrinking, to hold eye contact, to say, "I disagree," in a steady voice. Each time I did, a small part of me braced for someone to laugh the way kids had in middle school, the way relatives sometimes did when I talked about big plans. But the laughter never came. Instead, there were nods, follow-up emails, handshakes that lingered half a second longer than politeness required. I'd walk back to my hotel afterward, city air cool against my face, heart racing not from fear but from the unfamiliar feeling of being taken seriously. And still, when my mom called, I'd say, "Yeah, work's fine. Same old." One afternoon, a formal envelope arrived at my apartment, thicker than anything that usually came through my mail slot. My name was written in careful script. The paper was heavy, textured, the kind you almost hesitate to touch with ordinary hands. A gold seal caught the light as I turned it over, official without being flashy. I stood there for a full minute before opening it, pulse loud in my ears, as if the hallway itself were listening. When I finally read the letter inside, I sank onto the edge of the couch, reading it again, then a third time, making sure I hadn't imagined it. Footsteps passed outside my door, a neighbor laughing, a dog barking somewhere down the hall, ordinary life continuing while mine tilted quietly onto a new axis. I slid the letter back into the envelope and tucked it into a drawer beneath old notebooks and takeout menus. Some news feels too sacred to share too early. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to be seen by them. I didn't send updates they hadn't asked for. I didn't hint at milestones or fish for interest that might not come. I poured everything into the work itself, into late drafts and careful revisions, into calls that stretched past dinner and ideas that refused to let me sleep. The less I tried to prove myself at home, the more focused I became everywhere else. It was a strange kind of freedom, letting go of the audience you've been performing for your whole life. Have you ever reached that point, where you realize chasing approval is more exhausting than chasing your purpose? Where silence stops feeling lonely and starts feeling powerful? The gala wasn't just important. It was personal. And they had no idea how deeply our stories were already tangled with that night. A week before the gala, my mother called in the late afternoon, her voice carrying that careful brightness she used when a conversation had already been rehearsed. My father was on speaker too. I could hear the faint echo of the television in the background, the clink of ice in a glass. They asked about my week first, polite, surface level, then there was a pause that stretched just long enough to make my chest tighten. We wanted to talk about the event, my mother said. Event. Not gala. Not dinner. Something about the word choice made it feel like a problem to manage rather than a night to celebrate. My father cleared his throat. We think it might be better if you didn't come. Just like that. Calm. Decided. As if they were suggesting I skip a crowded restaurant, not a moment that had been glowing on my calendar for months. I waited for a reason that made sense, something logistical, something I could fix. Instead, my mother said softly, "We don't want questions." My father added, more direct, "It reflects badly if we can't explain what you do in a way that fits, that crowd." Fits. The word landed with a dull weight. All those years of work, of late nights and early mornings, of building something from nothing, and somehow it still didn't fit. Have you ever realized that the people who watched you grow still see an outdated version of you, like their memory froze while your life kept moving? I thought about explaining, about telling them everything, about finally laying my world out on the table. But their tone told me this wasn't curiosity. It was risk management. I said, "Okay. I understand." My voice sounded far away, even to me. After we hung up, the apartment felt unusually quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car horn echoed from the street below. I sat on the edge of my bed still holding the phone, screen gone dark, my reflection faint and blurred. I told myself I shouldn't be surprised. This was familiar territory, shrinking to keep the peace, agreeing to avoid being difficult. But something about this time felt different. Heavier. Maybe because, for once, I knew exactly what I was being asked to step away from. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, memories flickering through my mind like old home videos, science fairs, graduations, packed lunches eaten alone in library corners. All the moments I told myself, one day they'll see me. One day it'll make sense. What do you do when that day comes, and they still look away? I must have stayed there for an hour, shoes still on, thoughts circling. Part of me wanted to cry, another part just felt tired, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after years of trying. I reached over to my nightstand and opened the drawer, just a few inches, enough to see the edge of that heavy envelope tucked beneath everything else. Proof that my life was bigger than this conversation. Proof that their version of me wasn't the whole story. I closed the drawer again without touching it. Some truths need their moment. I rolled onto my side, pulling a pillow against my chest, and whispered into the empty room, "It's okay. I'm used to this." That should have been the end of the story. But then my phone rang. I stared at the screen when it lit up, an unfamiliar number, city area code I recognized but couldn't immediately place. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. I almost did. But something in my chest tightened, a quiet instinct I've learned not to ignore, and I answered. "Hello?" My voice was small, careful. The woman on the other end sounded calm, professional, the kind of voice trained to carry both authority and warmth at the same time. "Hi, may I speak with Emily Carter?" she asked. Hearing my full name like that made me sit up. "This is she." A soft shuffle of papers, then, "I'm calling from the Hawthorne Foundation regarding Saturday evening's gala. We noticed you haven't RSVP'd. My heart stuttered. Of all the reasons they could be calling, that was the one I'd tried hardest not to think about. I swallowed. "I think there might be some mistake," I said quietly. There was a pause, keys clicking in the background. "I assure you, there's no mistake," she replied. "As guest of honor, protocol requires your presence." The words didn't make sense at first. Guest of honor. My brain repeated them like a foreign phrase, searching for something familiar to latch onto. The room felt suddenly smaller, air thinner, like the walls had leaned in to listen. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "could you say that again?" She did, just as calmly, adding details about arrival times, a brief acknowledgement on stage, a seating arrangement near the front. Each sentence chipped away at the version of reality I'd been trying to accept all week. Shock came first, sharp and electric. Then fear, curling low in my stomach, fear of being seen, of being exposed, of everything changing at once. And underneath both, rising slowly, was something I hadn't let myself feel yet. Relief. I pressed my free hand against my chest, as if I could steady my heartbeat from the outside. All those nights, all those hidden efforts, all the moments I almost gave up, they had led somewhere real. Somewhere visible. "We're so excited to celebrate your work," the woman continued. Celebrate. The word echoed differently than it ever had at home. I glanced toward the dresser where my dress still hung, untouched, and for the first time it didn't look like a costume for someone else's world. It looked like it belonged to mine. "Will you be attending?" she asked gently. The question hung there, simple but enormous. I thought about my parents, about their careful smiles, their fear of questions, their need for everything to fit neatly into a story they could tell. Then I thought about the girl who filled out college forms alone, who worked double shifts, who learned to stop asking for permission to matter. "I could stay home and protect their comfort," I said slowly, more to myself than to her, "or show up and finally protect myself." There was a quiet strength in hearing the words out loud, like a door unlocking somewhere deep inside me. Have you ever stood at a crossroads where one path keeps the peace and the other keeps your dignity? Where choosing yourself feels both terrifying and overdue? I closed my eyes for a second, inhaled, and when I spoke again, my voice was steady. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." By the time the car turned onto the long, curved driveway of the hotel, the sky had deepened into that rich evening blue that makes city lights look almost unreal. The building rose ahead like something carved out of light itself, tall windows glowing gold, doormen in dark coats moving with quiet precision. I stepped out, heels meeting pavement with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have, my reflection briefly caught in the polished black door of the car before it pulled away. For a moment, I just stood there, cool night air brushing my shoulders, the distant hum of traffic mixing with the low murmur of arriving guests. Have you ever walked toward a place that once felt out of reach and realized your legs were carrying you there anyway? Each step toward the entrance felt measured, steady, like I was crossing an invisible line I'd been standing behind my whole life. Inside, the lobby opened wide and bright, marble floors stretching out beneath chandeliers that scattered light like falling stars. The air carried a faint blend of polished wood, fresh flowers, and something citrus from the drinks being passed on silver trays. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, the music soft but precise, weaving through conversation and quiet laughter. Dresses shimmered in deep reds and midnight blues, tuxedos crisp, cufflinks catching the light as people gestured mid-conversation. Champagne glasses clinked gently, a delicate sound that seemed to mark the rhythm of the room. I moved slowly, taking it in, not rushing, letting the reality of it settle into my bones. This wasn't a scene from a show or a photo online. I was standing in it. Breathing the same air. Belonging to the same moment. Near the entrance to the ballroom, a long table draped in white linen held neatly arranged name cards and a discreet security setup. A woman in a tailored black suit offered a professional smile. "Good evening. Name, please." My mouth felt dry for half a second, old habits urging me to shrink, to apologize for taking up space. But I lifted my chin slightly. "Emily Carter," I said. She scanned the list, then looked up, her expression shifting into something warmer, almost respectful. "Welcome, Ms. Carter. We've been expecting you." The words landed softly but firmly, like a hand at the center of my back guiding me forward. Not tolerated. Not squeezed in. Expected. I felt something in my chest loosen, a knot I hadn't known was still there. And as the doors to the ballroom opened, light and music spilling out, I took a breath and stepped inside. The ballroom felt warmer than the lobby, filled with the low hum of conversation and the soft rise and fall of string music carried in from the foyer. Round tables stretched across the room beneath tall centerpieces of white flowers, candlelight flickering in glass holders that reflected in the polished silverware. Waiters moved in smooth lines between guests, refilling champagne, offering quiet nods. I took a few steps inside, heart steady now, eyes adjusting to the glow, when I saw them across the room near one of the central tables. My mother noticed me first. I saw the exact moment recognition hit, her smile freezing mid-laugh, fingers tightening slightly around the stem of her glass. She blinked once, twice, as if I might disappear if she looked away. My father followed her gaze, confusion spreading slowly across his face as he turned and saw me standing there, coat draped over one arm, dress catching the light. His brows pulled together, not in anger yet, just disbelief, like he was trying to solve a puzzle missing a crucial piece. They leaned toward each other, whispering quickly, eyes darting back in my direction between hushed words. From a distance, their expressions might have passed for polite concern, but I knew them well enough to read the tension behind their smiles. Have you ever watched people try to rearrange reality in real time because it doesn't match the story they told themselves about you? I felt strangely calm, like I was observing the moment from just outside my body, years of emotional storms leading to this quiet center. My mother smoothed her dress and started toward me, steps measured, smile carefully rebuilt by the time she reached my side. Up close, I could see the tightness around her eyes, the questions she was trying not to show. "Why are you here?" she asked softly, the words wrapped in a pleasant tone that didn't quite hide the urgency underneath. Around us, laughter rose from a nearby table, glasses clinked, someone called for a photo, the world continuing as if this small collision of expectations and reality wasn't happening in the middle of it. I met her gaze, steady, not defensive, not apologetic. "I was invited," I said. Simple. True. Calm enough to leave no space for argument. She glanced back toward my father, who was now watching us openly, his expression caught between pride he didn't yet understand and worry about what this meant. Guests nearby pretended not to listen, but their attention lingered, curiosity floating just beneath polite conversation. My mother turned back to me, searching my face for context, for an explanation that would make this moment fit neatly into her version of the evening. But I didn't offer one. Not yet. Some truths need to unfold in their own time, in their own way. They still didn't understand why. The lights in the ballroom softened slightly, conversations tapering into a gentle hush as a spotlight found the small stage at the front of the room. A man in a tailored tuxedo stepped up to the microphone, smiling with the easy confidence of someone used to holding a crowd's attention. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice warm and steady. "Tonight is special." A ripple of polite applause moved through the room, glasses set down, chairs angled toward the stage. I stood near the back of the seating area, close enough to see my parents a few tables ahead, their posture straight, faces lifted with interest. My mother leaned toward my father, whispering something with an excited smile, already ready to be impressed by whoever was about to be honored. The MC continued, pacing his words carefully. He spoke about the foundation's early struggles, about limited resources and big dreams, about the moment everything began to change. Several years ago, he said, an individual chose to get involved, not for recognition, not for publicity, but because they believed deeply in what we were trying to build. Around the room, heads nodded, appreciative murmurs rising. My father crossed one leg over the other, expression thoughtful, as if mentally noting the kind of person he hoped to meet later. My mother's eyes shone with admiration, the way they always did when hearing about generosity attached to influence. They listened with open pride, certain the story belonged to someone whose name they would recognize from business headlines or charity boards. He described late-night strategy calls, careful restructuring, partnerships formed quietly behind the scenes. Because of this person's guidance and support, he said, we were able to expand our outreach, triple our scholarship program, and renovate facilities that had been neglected for over a decade. Applause broke out again, louder this time. I felt my pulse in my fingertips, in the base of my throat, each detail landing like a memory spoken aloud. Have you ever heard your own story told without your name attached, and felt the strange distance of it? Like listening to someone describe a life you recognize in every detail while standing unnoticed in the same room? My parents clapped with everyone else, smiling, my father shaking his head in impressed disbelief. Incredible, I saw him mouth. The MC paused, letting the applause fade. What makes this even more remarkable, he added, is that our honoree insisted on remaining anonymous for years. They wanted the focus to stay on the work, on the families helped, on the students who now have opportunities they once thought were impossible. A quiet awe settled over the crowd. My mother pressed a hand lightly to her chest, visibly moved. That's real class, she whispered to my father. I watched them, a mix of tenderness and ache moving through me, wondering what it would feel like for them to hear the rest. The MC glanced down at the card in his hand, then back up at the audience, smile widening. Tonight, we finally get to thank this person properly. He took a breath. And then, the name was read. A hush fell over the ballroom that felt sudden and heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Glasses paused mid-lift, whispers faded to near silence, and every head slowly began to turn toward the stage. I felt it too, the quiet vibration of anticipation building, a taut wire stretching across the room. Then the MC spoke, slow, deliberate, savoring each syllable. Please welcome the woman who made tonight possible. Ms. Rebecca Carter. The name hung in the air. Nothing moved for a heartbeat. Then the room began to register it. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crowd as eyes darted from faces to faces, some incredulous, some curious, some smiling before realizing the truth. My parents froze, mid-conversation, mid-thought, as though someone had pulled the rug from beneath their certainty. My mother gripped the back of her chair, knuckles white, eyes wide, searching my face for explanation, for reassurance, for understanding. My father opened his mouth once, then closed it, his hand hovering uselessly over a champagne flute he hadn't quite set down. I stepped forward, heels clicking lightly on the polished floor, each step steady, measured. Every inhale reminded me of all the late nights, all the invisible work, all the moments I had spent building this life quietly, patiently. The audience followed me instinctively, the room folding around me, stretching out in recognition. I didn't rush. I didn't falter. I walked to the stage, shoulders back, chin lifted, pulse steady, carrying a lifetime of effort in every careful movement. For the first time, all those years of being overlooked, of being invisible, felt like the wind at my back. The silence of shock and awe in the room wrapped around me like a cloak, and I allowed myself the quiet satisfaction of this moment, being seen, finally, completely, on my own terms. That I took a deep breath and stepped fully into the spotlight, letting the weight of the moment settle into my chest. The microphone felt steady beneath my fingers, the soft hum of anticipation rippling through the audience like a held breath. I looked out across the room, eyes catching the faces of mentors who had believed without fanfare, teammates who had stayed up late revising plans, and quiet supporters whose encouragement had never made headlines. Thank you, I began, voice calm but full, to everyone who guided me, who showed up when it mattered, and who believed quietly, even when recognition wasn't guaranteed. You've shaped this work in ways words can barely capture. I paused, letting the weight of that gratitude land, seeing nods, gentle smiles, the shimmer of eyes reflecting candlelight. I learned early that worth isn't loud. It's lasting, I continued, letting the statement linger. Not about applause, not about acknowledgement, but about the kind of value that builds quietly, steadily, and survives even when no one is watching. Each word was deliberate, measured, carrying the years of invisible effort that had brought me here. The audience felt it, leaning in instinctively, some holding back tears, others whispering to neighbors, caught up in the clarity and honesty of it. I spoke of challenges without complaining, of late nights without bitterness, of hope without entitlement. Every phrase reinforced the truth I wanted everyone to feel: dignity, patience, and resilience can triumph over neglect without ever needing to humiliate or demand recognition. The room absorbed it. A soft, sustained applause began, not polite, but heartfelt, growing louder as realization spread. There were no grudges voiced, no confrontations. Just acknowledgement, quiet, undeniable, and deserved. And in that moment, I understood that victory didn't need to hurt anyone else. It simply needed to be recognized on its own terms, enduring, permanent, and true. After the applause faded and the last few guests lingered near the stage, my parents made their way through the crowd. Their steps were hesitant, measured, as if navigating unfamiliar territory. My mother's hand fluttered near her lips, the beginnings of words that didn't quite form, while my father's jaw tightened in that way I knew meant he was trying to balance pride with regret. They stopped a few feet away, the space between us crowded with unspoken acknowledgement. "Rebecca, that was amazing," my mother finally said, voice catching just slightly, eyes searching mine for permission to feel the pride she hadn't expressed all these years. My father nodded, fumbling with a cufflink, then clearing his throat. "You've really done something remarkable." The apologies hung in the air, half-formed, tentative, like they were testing if it was safe to admit they'd underestimated me. I let them speak, let the words wash over me without needing to respond with gratitude or explanation. And then I realized something that felt quieter, heavier, and freer all at once: they finally saw me. But I no longer needed that. I had built my worth in the shadows, earned my place with persistence, and stepped into this spotlight for myself, not for their acknowledgement. Their recognition was a ripple, but I was already the tide. I smiled softly, letting the moment exist for what it was: closure, understanding, and the quiet, undeniable power of knowing you belong because you earned it, not because anyone else granted permission. That night, I didn't earn their approval. I outgrew it. The applause, the recognition, the spotlight, all of it wasn't about proving them right or demanding validation. It was about standing fully in the life I had quietly built, the work I had poured myself into, and knowing without doubt that my value had always been real, even when unseen. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you first? Felt the sting of doubt from the very ones who should have lifted you, only to realize the power to rise was already in your hands? Moments like that remind us that worth isn't given. It's claimed. It's nurtured. It's steady, even when others fail to notice. If this story stayed with you, like the video, and subscribe. We tell stories that matter. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. Because sometimes, seeing someone else claim their place quietly, patiently, courageously, reminds us that we can too.